Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to Andersen Acres. We're in the kitchen again today. Today we're going to make caraway rye bread. It's delicious and fun and very, very hearty. So let's get started. It's really simple. First you're going to do 1 1/8 cup of water. Okay, so you do need a little extra water with this recipe just because between the rye flour and the caraway, it does absorb a lot of water, so you do need that extra 1/8 of a cup. You're going to put 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. You'll notice it looks like the shape of my measuring spoons. You need to make sure it is firmly packed. When you measure brown sugar, unless it tells you to pack it loosely, you need to pack it tightly. You want 2 teaspoons of caraway seeds. They're easy to find at your grocery store. You want about a 1/4 teaspoon of onion powder. It just gives it a nice bold flavor if you have just a hint of onion in there. And you want a teaspoon of salt. I use Himalayan usually, but you don't have to. Now you're only going to want 1 cup of rye flour. Rye is very heavy as a flour, so if you put too much rye flour, your dough ends up really, really dense. So only 1 cup of rye. We're going to use 2 cups of all-purpose. 2 cups of all-purpose, just regular white flour. That just cuts the rye flour enough that it all goes really well and it rises nicely and it doesn't get so dense and gummy. Finally, 1 heaping teaspoon of bread machine yeast or quick rise if you can't actually find bread machine. Either works. Now we're going to pop this in the bread maker. If you're mixing by hand, you'll probably need for 5 to 10 minutes, knead your dough. We're putting it in the bread maker. It'll be ready in an hour and a half. That will mix, knead, and rise my dough. So we'll come back in an hour and a half and see how this has done. I forgot to add the butter. You need 2 tablespoons of butter, or you can use margarine if you like, but you need it in the dough. Sorry, but at least I added it now. Now we're going to pop it in the bread maker. So again, back in an hour and a half. Well, our dough has finished its first rise. This is our caraway rye dough. It's looking pretty good. You can see the caraway seeds in there, and I can smell the onion powder. Barely, but I can smell it. So now we're going to shape it into an oblong loaf, not too skinny, not too fat. Okay, just the perfect size. So I'm going to make my loaf, oh, pinch your ends closed by the way. I'm going to make my loaf about 12 inches long, 10 inches long. I happen to have my circle here and my marks on my mat. If you don't have that, just guess. So we're just going to roll it gently. Search for any air bubbles as you roll it, because if you find an air bubble, there's one right there, just push it out, pull the dough back up, and pinch it off again, because you don't want air bubbles trapped in there, because rye bread should definitely not have giant air bubbles inside the loaf. So try to make it about equal of thickness here and about 12 inches long. Looks about good. You don't have to be too fussy with this. You don't want to handle it too much because it won't rise very well. So it looks really good. Just going to roll it up just a little bit more. So now we're going to stick it on a pan. And yes, the exact same pan I've used so many times before. So we're just going to put it seam side down, kind of arrange it. Kind of arrange it on the pan there, just like that. Fluff it up a little bit. Now we're going to give it an hour to an hour and a half to rise. Remember, rye flour does kind of inhibit the rising process a little bit, so we want to give it a chance. So that means ignoring it. So you're going to cover it with a damp cloth or stick it in your microwave to rise, whichever works for you. I use my microwave just because then nothing touches it, the cat doesn't walk on it, you know, things that can happen to dough. So we're just going to stick this aside to rise for 60 to 90 minutes, and we will come back and check on it then. All right, so our caraway rye bread has risen up nicely. It's looking quite puffy. So now we just want to coat it and get it in the oven. So the first thing we're going to do is take an egg, just a regular egg. We're not adding any water to it or anything. We're just taking an egg, and I'm just using my basting brush to mix it up. You could use your whisk, but that dirties 2 dishes, and I don't want to. So I'm using this. So when you coat it with the egg, you want to get all of the spots, okay? Now you don't want it drenched in egg, but you do want it completely covered. It'll give you a nice crust, and it also gives something for our salt to adhere to, because we're actually going to salt the tops, actually. So we're just going to make sure we get all the spots. Okay, you could do just an egg whitewash, but I prefer to use a whole egg on this. You're not going to use the entire egg, but I do like using the yolk and the white together. It just gives you a really nice crust on this particular bread. So we're just going to, sorry, I have a couple of crevices over here that I want to get to, and that looks good. Next up, we're going to take our sea salt. You can use any salt, but something that's a little coarser. We're just going to grind this on top. Just go back and forth about 3 times. You don't want it like lots of salt, but you want enough. Now you're going to take your bread lane. You're going to slash your bread. Push down, nice gashes. We're doing 3 gashes. You can do however many you like, but I'm doing 3. Like that. Excellent. That's looking good. So now this is going to go into the oven for about 25 to 30 minutes. Go closer to 30 because rye breads, you want them a little bit darker. So around 30 minutes, 25, if you want a little lighter crust, you're fine. And you're going to do it at 375, only for about half an hour. So we'll pop it in the oven and we'll come back in half an hour and see how it's doing. So this is our finished Caraway Rye bread. It's piping hot from the oven, so you're going to want to let it sit about 20 minutes before you cut it, but it looks fantastic and smells even better. So I hope you're going to try to make Caraway Rye bread yourself sometime. But thanks for joining us today. If you would like to see more of our videos, don't forget to subscribe so that we keep baking for you. See you tomorrow.